You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. This episode, my friend, if it was recorded a couple of hours ago, I would have been talking a mile a minute, because for the first time ever, I switched from having a latte to a cappuccino.
Oh, that's a bump up, isn't it?
At the size of how I drink my lattes.
Okay, that's a big bump up, isn't it?
Yeah, my kids laughed their ass off at me this morning. They're like, "Dad, you're talking too fast." Like I was like Beavis when he has way too much. And he's like, "Cappuccino!" Like that was me today.
So did you need TP for your bunghole? Like, were you walking around with the shirt over the head going,
yeah.
"I am Chris Julio"? Nah.
I did 3 days worth of tasks in a morning. Like, it was great for getting stuff done. The crash, I believe, is happening right now. So if I start talking gibberish, that's the reason behind it.
Okay, so you're not having a stroke. You're just coming down off of a massive caffeine buzz.
Exactly, and that's why I'll be drinking at the bar. Okay, so this episode of Sox in the Basement brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park. You know that. It's the place to be pregame, postgame. Bring the whole family over. Feed them. It's a much better price. Oh my goodness, the prices in the ballpark are disgusting. They're just
they really are.
Crazy. It's crazy. And that campfire milkshake, again, I said it last episode. We gave the campfire milkshake to 2 teenage girls, and their reaction was, eh.
It's not bad. It's just not what you. It's not what they're telling you.
It's $15. I'm sorry. Like, I know it's ballpark prices, but no, I don't think it's a $5
I
shake.
I even did the John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. That's a $15 milkshake,
right?
There's just milk and ice cream. It's got no bourbon in it or nothing. That's $15.
If there was a 30 for 30 on the campfire milkshake, it would start off, "What if I told you that a milkshake was the best thing about a baseball team season, and it wasn't even that good?"
White Sox, go.
Anyway, you get much better food, much better drink selection, incredible bar over at Cork and Carry at the Park. I didn't mean to take an insult to the milkshake and wrap it into a Cork and Carry at the Park ad. It just kind of happened that way because I would just prefer pregame to be over there and postgame the party with Sox fans, win or lose, and talk about the game.
And you know, if Cork and Carry did a milkshake, be much better.
It would be better. They should do their own milkshake.
They really should.
Absolutely incredible. That's an idea for them. A boozy milkshake. That seems like a great idea.
Yeah, or have a non-boozy option for the kids, too.
I'm giving that one for free. See more at corkandcarry.com. Okay, so I want to do this episode today. I was thinking about what I want to talk about, and I think we need to slow it down at this moment when it comes to the White Sox as we get close to Memorial Day weekend.
There's some brake pumping that needs to happen.
A little bit of brake pumping because there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions about this team, and one prevailing opinion that I continue to see pushed over the last week or so, I think is so flawed and so wrong that I'm here to tell you you're not crazy for disagreeing with it. Because I think most White Sox fans hear the opinion and they go, no, that's wrong. And the people giving the opinion will sit there and tell you you're a bad baseball fan. You don't know anything about baseball. You don't see the big picture. Of course we have to do it this way. And I don't fault them for doing it, right? Because this is something that's been ingrained into the baseball lexicon, especially here in Chicago, but basically all across fandom for Major League Baseball for the last decade and a half. And that is the idea that if you want to win a championship, you have to trade all your assets away and gather as many prospects as possible, tear it down to the studs, and then create a window to win a title. And I think that that's flawed. And I'm saying this because I'm seeing all this stuff of, well, you got to trade Fedde because you only have him for this year and next. You got to trade Crochet because he's going to be gone in a couple years. You got to trade Luis Robert Jr. because if you're going to trade Fedde and Crochet, you might as well trade Robert because you're going to get the biggest haul for him. You got to trade this guy. You got to trade that guy. And my thing is, then what do you have? A bunch of prospects that don't actually work out. I would challenge you right now to find baseball teams that tried to do this over the last decade and a half and actually look at the results. Look at the top 30 on a team. You can go to MLB Pipeline and you could find a team and you could find a year. So pick a team that was that tried one of these rebuilds, or any team in a system. Go back 5 years. Pick a team. and look at the top 30 prospects they have, and then ask yourself how many of these guys turned out better than replacement level, where you would say this was a good prospect that became a difference maker on a team. And I would say 2 out of every 10 prospects maybe become that kind of a player. 6 guys on that top 30 list. And that may be a stretch, which means the majority of prospects that you're gathering don't work out. And I don't blame the prospect heads. This is what they do. We have them on. I love them. Elijah Evans, smart guy, just baseball, future Sox. I love what he says about prospects. I talked to him, though, to try to find out, are there any guys that are actually going to make it to the major leagues? The ones that don't, I don't care about, because I'm a White Sox fan, not a prospect fan. I talked to James Fox about it. I'm sure we're going to have him on soon. We've been talking about it. I love him. He has great information, all the guys over at Future Sox. But prospects are prospects. Most of them don't work out. These guys love them because this is what they watch. But that's not what I want. I want a team that competes. And if I look back over the last decade and a half, Ed, and then I'm going to let you jump in here because I know you want to. I look at the beginning of the 2010s and Chicago fans seeing this philosophy really pop up because of the Chicago Cubs. Sox fans listened to this philosophy because of what the Cubs were doing. And in the end, tearing it down to the studs and bringing it back up again got them a World Series that may not happen if it doesn't rain during Game 7 or a ball bounces the wrong way. It was that close, and it was won. And that may be one of the best success stories out there, because when the Astros did it, the World Series they won due to the rebuild, not the one that was later that's more recent, which was bought and paid for, but the one that was from the rebuild. That World Series, they cheated to get. So I don't count that as being because they tore it down to the studs and they brought it back up again. I look at what the White Sox did. They tried to rebuild in the middle of that decade. It didn't work. They tried again at the end of the decade. And guess what? It didn't work. And now people are suggesting we do it again. I look at recently, like right now, the Pittsburgh Pirates walked into this season after having a really nice season, and everybody's saying, okay, they've got it all now. They've got Cabrian Hayes and Brian Reynolds and O'Neill Cruz, and look at all these guys. Henry Davis, #1 overall draft pick. And none of them can hit. And they're under 500. And they're doing exactly what the 2021 White Sox did. Or the 22 White Sox did. They're just underperforming. And if they do make the playoffs, there's no guarantee that they're going to win a World Series. They've even gotten pitching they didn't expect this year, and it's not working out very well for them. They've got some stories. They got some excitement. But why did they suffer for all those years? And I see it time in and time out. While I look at a list of World Series winners recently, Ed, and most of them bought and paid for their World Series. They did not tear it down to the studs. They did not rely on prospects. They did not make their fan base watch losing teams for years and years with a big payoff.
There's a couple things to unpack there.
I gave a lot because I wanted to get it out there because we're going to talk about it on this show.
You did. So there's a couple things to unpack. First of all, there is a misnomer about what it means to tear it down to the studs, okay? And really what you're talking about when you say tear it down to the studs is try and get rid of players that don't have any future with you or are coming to an end of a contract that are also not going to be worth keeping around into a championship window for whatever reason it might be. Or because they are so good and so valuable to another team that what you get back can absolutely jumpstart it. It's the idea of trading one player where you're going to be able to use that to bring back enough that you're taking care of at multiple positions, okay, with what you get, okay? So the idea behind, for example, the Chris Sale trade was to bring back both a starting pitcher and a quality major league infielder. And in that case, Yohan Moncada was supposed to also be a star because he was the top prospect in baseball at the time. But this idea of tearing it down to the studs and only going with prospects, and every position on the field is going to be somebody who's got a prospect pedigree or was a young player that was drafted or traded for or brought in internationally, and there's going to be no free agents, there's going to be nobody you traded for, it has never happened. That's not the way the Cubs did it. That's not the way the Astros did it. That's not the way anybody's ever done it, okay? When the Cubs did it, yes, they had some prospects. They drafted guys like Kyle Schwarber and Chris Bryant. They paid a hell of a lot of money, probably more money than he was worth, to bring in Jason Hayward, okay?
Who gave the speech that saved the World Series.
I thought that was Anthony Rizzo naked on a table. But you hear conflicting reports, and I wasn't in the locker room, so I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that they also bought pitching, right? Because they did not settle for their pitching prospects. The Cubs had veteran pitchers on their staff, right? They had guys that they brought in. They spent money, too. The Astros, yes, they had a lot of young players, but they had veterans like Derek Fisher was still hanging around, okay? They had Carlos Beltran on that team. They had Justin Verlander, who was originally with the Detroit Tigers. He was not homegrown.
I think what you just said is the eye-opening thing that people forget about in this argument. Is it as eye-opening as a new exterior window door, patio door, or storm door on your home? No. That makes your home stunning. That basically makes it a new home. That's something you should be considering this time of year. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is there for you with no high-pressure sales. They're not in your kitchen. You're in their showroom. Full examples, glass designs on display, no pictures in a book. See it in person with an owner in showroom and on site when they install with their own installers. They don't farm out the work. That's how they've been doing it for over 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. Every major brand is custom made. No stock items for a perfect fit. They are a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. But think about what you're saying here, Ed, because this goes against this thought process as well that I keep hearing. Well, Jerry Reinsdorf won't spend any money, so you have to do it this way. Well, guess what? If you do it this way, he's still not going to spend money when you need him to spend it. It's not going to work. Like, I would contend that you could go out right now. I still believe it. You buy out Moncada, you buy out Jimenez, you keep your payroll at $80 million and maybe elevate it to $100 million and sit in the middle of Major League Baseball, which is completely feasible with Jerry Reinsdorf. You purchase some free agent hitters. You go out and get guys like if Mike Clevenger is in here, you go get a guy of Mike Clevenger's caliber. You go fill in a little bit, use some of the young guys that you have, and you keep guys like Fedde and Crochet, and you could be a playoff contender next year. You'd have to get rid of the manager that you have who hates young players, throws them under the bus, like when Brian Ramos gets hurt and he gets asked about the injury and he goes, he missed a hit and run signal. I mean, he hates young players. A guy like that can't be the manager of your team. He's the reason why you were off to such a bad start. He's the reason why he won't be able to maintain what you're doing right now. He's the reason he needs to be replaced. He's got Gavin Sheets dropping fly balls out in right field. He doesn't mention that, but he can't wait to throw the young prospect that's hitting over 280, which is a welcome surprise, under the bus on an unrelated response to a question about something else. But anyway, back to this. You keep hearing this like, well, Jerry won't spend, so we have to do this. And my thing is, Jerry's never going to spend. But you can keep a payroll down and create a team much easier and be a contender, which maybe has a puncher's chance in the playoffs. I know we were always against that for years and years and years. But this other way, it doesn't work, Ed. And the thing that I believe is the biggest problem is this. Okay, I don't want to be too philosophical about it, but here's the problem. It's ego. It's a mixture of a billionaire and many other billionaires like him in Jerry Reinsdorf and other ownership that doesn't want to spend money, and they go, well, this is a great idea. You're going to tear it down and I don't have to spend money for a couple years and I'm going to get richer. Go for that rebuild idea, right? And then it's a general manager who believes that if they were given a blank slate, they could paint a masterpiece. So they don't want anybody else's stuff and they want to tear things down. And this is across all of baseball. You have a lot of guys getting paid a lot of money who think they're the smartest guy in the room. And the thing is, none of them have ever run a business. Like, I run a business. I started a podcast company and I have 3 very successful shows that make me a lot of money that allow me to work for myself and a production business. What I don't talk about are the 15 shows that failed in the first 6 years. Okay. And the mistakes that I made and the things I learned. And I started this from scratch. I started this when people didn't pay for podcast advertising. Like, I found a way to do it. And other guys in the marketplace have found ways to do it. We all started what we're doing here by scratch, and we made lots of mistakes. And I understand that it's very hard to build something from the ground up. And in the end, it's basically impossible almost. And all of these GMs are like, if I could just get a blank slate and I could just start over with a bunch of prospects, I will make every prospect picked right. Every trade I make will hit. Everybody will stay healthy. No weird things will happen. And it'll all just work out because it looks good on paper. And it's the ego mixed with billionaires trying to save money that have now created this across all of Major League Baseball where people think tearing down is a good philosophy, but in reality, it doesn't work. And we've seen it fail twice so far with our own team and across Major League Baseball now for a decade and a half.
Well, stop lobbing full suitcases at me, will you? I wasn't even done unpacking the first rant you went on, and now I got to deal with this one.
Yeah, I drank a lot of cappuccino today.
No kidding.
Go. You have the floor. I'll be quiet.
In case you're wondering, Mellow Yellow can't keep up with cappuccino because that's what I've been drinking all day. But look, going back a little bit here to before we get into the egos of the general managers and the owners, going back to the idea of tearing it down to the studs and rebuilding. Yeah, at some point though, what ends up happening to happen is even if you sacrifice a few star players to try and bring back some extra talent because you want to maximize what you get and you want to try and stretch that budget, okay? That part of it is all Sox fans, I think, ever were given to pick up on. And it was never about the other part. Because remember, we did have that moment of Rick Hahn saying, we will spend the money. And in the last rebuild, he attempted to, but he spent poorly. Okay. And that's what's going to end up having to happen here is if you want to do this, you mentioned the Pittsburgh Pirates, who I think have been rebuilding since the 1990s at this point. But when you spend money, you got to spend it wisely. Okay. When the Astros bring in Justin Verlander to anchor their staff, that is a wise amount of money spent, even though he's an expensive man. Okay. When the Cubs do it with John Lester, who at that point had some gas left in the tank and was still able to muster up enough to basically be the ace of a championship staff, that's money well spent. When they're spending mid-level dollars on a guy like Jake Arrieta or on a guy like John Lackey, the 2016 Cubs, they're counting on veterans who are going to, when given a good situation, still be able to rise to the occasion and bring some value. And that's where Eric Fedde comes into play. Okay, that's where Tommy Pham comes into play. You know, even like that. What Sox fans need to get over is the idea that we can't extend anybody ever because Jerry won't pay for them. And if that's true, then fully expect you're never going to compete, except for like the 2005 White Sox, where a bunch of guys come together, lightning hits, it ends up in a bottle, and you can't sustain that year in and year out. But if that's what it is, and there's a different team on the field every year, and a couple of young stars that are, while they're controllable, that are the playthrough, you almost might be able to work with that. But again, to your point now, unpacking the second bag, the carry-on that was too heavy and needed to be checked at the door, the GM's ego and the owner's egos, yeah, some of that does come into play because Jerry Reinsdorf is still a guy who refuses to invest long-term in a pitcher, which is going to be a problem for him eventually because at some point, an ace pitcher is going to have to get paid. And is Eric Fedde an ace pitcher? No, he's a very nice pitcher. He's a good story. It's still early yet. The league might catch up to him. He might be the Washington Nationals version of himself by the time the year is out. So let's not worry about that too much. But for right now, Eric Fedde's a nice veteran to have. And maybe because of his age and because of the experience here, if he likes it here or whatever, maybe he's a guy that will sit there and take a couple-year contracts and continue to work on himself and do that. Maybe he's a guy that's going to go out and say, I want 5 years minimum, and Jerry won't give it to him. I don't think we can cast that out just yet because we don't know what he is just yet. Garrett Crochet, yes, eventually will probably want to get paid. But for right now, he's under control. Don't worry about it. And then keep bringing up guys like Drew Thorpe. Keep bringing up guys like Nick Nastrini and Jonathan Cannon and whoever you can to build around it. But also get some veterans on 1 or 2 year contracts, and that's okay too. But Chris Getz and other GMs that want to do the rebuild, absolutely. It's why we play fantasy baseball, man. It's because we are sitting there saying either every year we're going to take a blank slate or every year we're going to have to choose something to build on the year before if you're in a league with keepers. And we love doing that as fans. And GMs love doing that too. It's just that they get to do it with real human beings and actual money. And it's frankly weird when I say it out loud that way.
Sox fans, here's the deal. When you combine State Farm home and auto insurance, you save an average of $889. State Farm agent John Harrell is ready to help you combine home and auto and save in Chicagoland. Call him today. 708-481-4500. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Average annual per household savings based upon a 2019 national survey by State Farm of new policyholders who reported savings by switching to State Farm. phone line with me right now, the Sox nerd. He's with us each and every week. Dave Marin puts all those interesting tidbits up on the scoreboard. If this team keeps playing the way it's playing, he may have more people watching that scoreboard this summer, and he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on this weekend and beyond at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, you were the sole representative. I'm going to use you as a Sox in the Basement representative at the big Last Comiskey book party that was earlier this week or a couple of days ago, and you were there because I couldn't go, because I had a graduation event for my high school senior, and I had to pick her over the big party. But I would imagine it was a star-studded affair filled with former guests like Nancy Faust walking around and yourself, correct?
It was really fantastic. And, you know, the crux of that documentary is the last season at Comiskey Park. And as every year goes by, every day passes by, I just become more and more fond of that team and that year and the vibe in that park. It was a perfect year, and that documentary and the book capture it so beautifully. It was really a great night, really was.
Awesome. What do you got for me this week?
Chris, some days Sox games give you nada. Sunday's 6-0 loss to Cleveland was a great example of that. Nothing really distinguishable came out of that one except for my undying love for the pitch clock. Games like that, particularly on Sundays, used to drag on, not so much anymore. That clunker was over in a snappy 2 hours and 12 minutes thanks to the pitch clock. Some days, though, Sox games give you lots. This series with the Nats gave me plenty of scoreboard, Sox in the Basement, and Twitter material. For example, Paul DeJong played shortstop and hit fourth in Tuesday's second game against the Nationals. That hadn't happened to the Sox since August 20th, 2011, when Alexei Ramirez did it for the only time in his career. DeJong hit there again on Wednesday, making him the first shortstop to hit cleanup for the Sox in consecutive games since the stash, Jose Valentin, on July 2nd and July 3rd, 2001, against the Cubs. DeJong was the first to do this in back-to-back home games since Ron Hansen in a May 6, 1964 doubleheader against the A's. For the record, Hall of Famer Luke Appling is the Sox shortstop leader with 377 starts in the fourth hole. Last week I talked about numbers. DeJong's 29 is an interesting one. Number 29 has never led the Sox in homers, and it's been 57 years since a shortstop donned that number that Blackjack made famous. Corey Lee had a rare performance on Wednesday. Lee was the first White Sox catcher with at least 3 hits, a steal, and an RBI in a game since August 29, 2001, when Josh Paul did it at Detroit. In addition, Lee was the first Sox backstop with that offensive combo and to catch a shutout since Carlton Fisk accomplished it on September 16, 1983. That was the day before the Sox clinched the AL West. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you pearls like these can be found on my blog, which can be accessed at soxinthebasement.com. Getting back to Paul DeJong, heading into the weekend, DeJong is leading the Sox with 6 homers. The only time a shortstop paced the Sox in dingers was way back in 1932. That year, a fella named Red Kress topped the Sox with 9 homers. He wasn't a pure shortstop, so you could say the Sox have never had a true shortstop lead them in homers. That's it, Chris. More than you wanted to know about Paul DeJong, the stash, old aches and pains, and Red Kress.
The Sox are there. I love the Paul DeJong references. This show yelled about why isn't he moved up in the order? Suddenly he's up in the order. We yelled about Corey Lee not getting playing time. Suddenly Corey Lee is getting more playing time, hitting around 300. We're like this Brian Ramos. He's got to play more. Pedro Gaffol was like, well, he's a younger kid. I'm just going to throw him under the bus for no reason. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, nerd. Thanks so much.
All right, we will chat next week as the Sox move closer to whatever.
So let's look at what we have, because I mean I think that's the main thing. Like, we could sit here and we can yell, and we are kind of doing that today, about the idea that this is a terrible way to build a team. that it doesn't, I mean, seriously.
Actually, I don't think that when we look at what the White Sox have right now, I would argue that this is not a terrible way to build a team.
No. The idea of tearing down to the studs. What I'm trying to say is the idea that's starting to be pushed, which is trade Crochet, trade Fedde, trade Robert, trade all this. This is a terrible way to build a team. I mean, and I'll make the example very clear right now. The Rangers won the World Series. They were bought. The Houston Astros won the World Series, bought. The Atlanta Braves won the World Series, a lot of money spent there. The Los Angeles Dodgers, I don't even think I need to say anything else, okay? The Nationals in 2019, there was money spent. The Red Sox, there was money spent. The Astros cheated. The Cubs, I already covered. I don't know how much further I got to go back. This idea of just a bunch of prospects are going to net you a world championship is false. And so instead, if you look at what we have right now, I have a catcher in Corey Lee and a guy who's a prospect in Caro that's down there that might also join him. So I feel really good right now with the guy who's hitting 300, who was a first-round draft choice and is playing well. That's a nice thing to have. The guy that's standing over at first base is at best a platoon guy with the guy you have out in right field. But if you take Vaughn and you take Sheets, and you're not afraid to bat them in the bottom half of the lineup, they could be a part of your team if you really want to waste it on a position like first base where you should have a power hitter, okay? Your second base, I don't think is Nicky Lopez. But if you were able to find a guy, even if it isn't Paul DeJong there, but if you were able to find a guy that could play defense and have the pop of DeJong standing at second instead, you'd be good, especially with Colson Montgomery likely coming over to short next year and the way that Brian Ramos is playing. And Luis Robert Jr. standing in center field makes me feel really good about my team.
Luis Robert Jr. standing in general would be
anywhere, right?
Yes.
And having Andrew Benintendi, it's kind of you're stuck with him, right? But that's okay. That's okay because, like I said, you're not going to have perfect guys at every position, right? But what you can do with that, with what I just rattled off, you can go out and you can look at a group of first basemen who would fill in at first base or DH that would add to your lineup in Paul Goldschmidt, Pete Alonso, Rhys Hoskins, Anthony Rizzo, Christian Walker's out there. Ryan O'Hearn is a very solid hitter. There are names that are out there that can add to your offense and you can fill into one of those spots. There are outfielders that will be free agents next year that you need to add in. Like, I would love to see some of the young guys they have down there work out, but in reality, the outfield class next year has so many professional hitters, one of them needs to be added into your outfield and placed out there in right field. It has to happen. You want to find your fourth outfielder, fine, but you can add a top half of the order hitter very easily and very affordably with the money that you save on buying out Moncada and Jimenez. You can get those two hitters added into your lineup at a minimum. And you can find guys like Tommy Pham out there for the money you spend on Tommy Pham if you start going that direction. And as far as pitching is concerned, you mentioned it. You got Crochet and Fedde already. You've got Thorpe on the way. You've got nice players like Nastrini and Cannon who I think need more opportunity up here. And you can go and sign guys like a Clevenger for Clevenger money. This is not hard to put together a team that can have a winning record and still have the young guys that you gathered last year at the trade deadline working their way back up to the majors and continue to find assets when you find a trade that makes sense and then still buy assets or trade for assets and be a team that competes year in, year out. Instead of this tear it down and hope for a window thing, which we know doesn't work, if you did it that way, next year you could be a competitive team. And if a guy leaves, replace him. That's how this works. This idea of, but then what will we do when Fedde leaves in 26? You'll go out and you'll replace Eric Fedde, or one of those pitchers you're developing in the minors will actually be ready because there's more names than what I just gave out. That guy that they gave Jake Berger up for should be ready by 26 to slide in the Fedde spot. So what do you need another guy for Fedde when you have Eater sitting down there? That's the defeatist mentality of not believing that you can do this without trading guys away, when in reality, you're a new manager, a couple of free agent signings, and the development in a year of some of these guys that are right here on the cusp in a weak division of being able to go out and play winning baseball. And I would rather see that after watching the other way, which was a pie in the sky belief. If you guys put up with this for about 3-4 years, you're going to have the greatest team ever put on paper. That's a lie. And it never happens for any fan base that's ever been promised it. And I don't want to buy the lie anymore. If they make a deal and trade away a Garrett Crochet this offseason or a Luis Robert Jr., I will be angry and I won't care what the return is, because I guarantee you the 4 players they get back will be lucky if one of them actually rise to the level of the guy we just traded away. You can't tell me trading Cease, Crochet, and Fedde, looking at it from a big picture, is going to net you a Cease, Crochet, and Fedde in 2 years. I don't believe it'll happen. You may get lucky with what you got from Drew Thorpe, because I'm seeing a guy down there that can pitch, but we don't even know if he's going to make it because he's only in AA.
I said it before, I'll say it again, but this is the takeaway message, okay? Every single team, every year, looks at their young players, their veterans, and what they have on the major league roster, what they have in the minor leagues, what's out there in free agency, what they need to acquire via trade, and the smart GMs put it all together based on what they have and what's available. And that's how you build a team, and that's how you build continuity, because when Eric Fedde leaves, Drew Thorpe arrives. When Eric Fedde leaves, Jake Eder arrives. That's great. Noah Schultz arrives. That's great. That's how that works, okay? Or Eric Fedde leaves, and somebody that we don't even know right now has gone to Korea and turned himself into a Cy Young Award winner over there, or whatever their equivalent
You
is.
sign him when Fedde leaves.
And you sign him when Fedde leaves.
Thank
exactly.
You. For the same amount of money, there'll be an Eric Fedde out there next year.
Or
and the
you
year
find
after
a Chris
that.
Flexen, who's pitching decently for no money down. And there's endless possibilities. The one thing that no team has done is build 26 high-end prospects into a super team. It's never happened. It won't happen. Hold on to the guys you want to hold on to. Get rid of the guys you feel like you can move on from. Acquire the talent you're missing. And then go get a campfire milkshake.
Gross.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.